Hey, so we're we're reading, and I'm going to try to read almost on a daily basis to get through this. So we're reading from The Power of Now, and which is kind of cool. So I started yesterday, and if you have a copy of The Power of Now, it would be great if you pull it out and maybe follow along. So yesterday we read the introduction and the forward, and you know if if uh, if you're following along with this and you're finding it a little difficult to kind of understand or get, that's okay. It's almost like understanding isn't important. It's more that an awareness comes that is the important thing, and the awareness that comes is that a lot of what we've believed, a lot of what we think, is just not true, and that's really, not from me. That's from Eckhart Tolle, and you'll see as we go along, and I read to you and share this book with you, you'll get that's the basics of it. That we're feeling, unhappy, or wondering what's going on in life, or searching for some meaning. It isn't available in the traditional sense, well, you'll see if you follow along and with me as we read this book. So again, looking at Power of Now, and I'm only in a few pages, really. We're just on page 17, and he talks about the mind, and that the mind is a tool, and you begin to see that exactly that. So I'm really honored to be sharing this with you, and hope you enjoy. That's it. It's yeah. So feeling ourselves from our mind, freeing ourselves from our mind. So imagine that if we're feeling captive, we're feeling trapped, it's in the mind, right? It's not really in anything else. We've created it all in our mind. And so here we go. What do we mean by watching the thinker? When someone goes to the doctor and says, "I hear a voice in my head," he or she will most likely be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that in a very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice or several voices in their head all the time. The involuntary thought process that you don't realize you have the power to stop. Okay, the involuntary thought processes that you don't realize you have the power to stop. Continuous monologues or dialogues in the mind. You have probably come across mad people in the street, incessantly talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not much different from what you and all other normal people do, except you don't do it out loud. The voice comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, dislikes, and so on. The voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be reviving the recent or distant past, or rehearsing or imagining possible future situations. Here, it often imagines things going wrong and negative outcomes. That is called worry. Sometimes this soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is relevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret it in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history, as well as the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So, you see and judge the present through the eyes of the past, and get a totally distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice of a person's own worst enemy. It is not uncommon for the voice to be a person's own worst enemy. Many people live with the tormentor in their head It continuously attacks and pursues them and punishes them and drains them of vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness, as well as disease. So Eckhart Tolle, from The Power of Now, talking about the voice in your head. It's funny, eh? Because we would think, oh, what do you mean the voice in my head? Well, you know what we mean, and everybody knows. Inner dialogue. Years ago, when I was in Bali with Paul, one of my teachers, and we would kind of split up in a triad with 3 people, and 2 people would continuously just let their inner dialogue come out, and it was difficult to just say what was happening, what we were thinking in the moment, you know, and like me sitting here in front of the of this phone talking to you and reading the book, and at the same time the inner dialogue is, oh, nobody wants to hear this. This is silly, and what are you doing this for? Who do you think you are? Those are all the inner dialogues that run on inside. And the truth is, it doesn't matter. It seems like the right thing to do, to share this, and so whether anybody listens or not, I am, and I'm getting it. So, but mostly we're not honest. We don't tell and talk about our inner dialogue. We don't talk about what's happening inside of our thought process, and so we're kind of dishonest. We don't want to share the truth of what's happening in the moment. So the good news, Eckhart Tolle says, is that you can free yourself from your mind. It is the only true liberation. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought patterns, those old gramophone records that you have been playing in your head perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head. Be there as a witnessing presence. Nice. When you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. Do not judge or condemn what you hear, for doing so will mean that the same voices come in again through the back door. You soon realize there is the voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. You'll soon realize there is the voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. This I am realization, this sense of your own presence, is not a thought. It arises from behind the mind. Nice. So when you listen to a thought, you're aware not only of the thought, but also of yourself as the witness of the thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to the thought, you feel a conscious presence, your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, as it were. The thought then loses its power over you and quickly subsides, because you are no longer energizing the mind through identification with it. Nice. Hope you guys are interested in this. It's hard to say. Well, here we are. A lot of what happens on the planet is we do all kinds of things to distract ourselves from the misery of our thoughts, and from the internal dialogue of I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not smart enough, and or maybe even the opposite. I am smarter than anyone else. I am better looking than anyone else, and from that perspective, we're separated from others. So either one, not good enough or superior, inferior or superior, separates us. Okay, when a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps will be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they will become longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness and peace inside you. This is the beginning of your own natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. You also feel a subtle emanation of joy arising from deep within, the joy of being. Nice. It is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of our consciousness, the price of stillness, a lack of vitality and alertness, then it would not be worth having. In this state of interconnectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind-identified stillness, in the mind-identified state. You are fully present. It also rises the vibration frequency of your energy field that gives life to the present body. Wow. As you go more deeply into this realm of no mind, it is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body as well as the whole external world become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish, but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought. It takes you beyond. Sorry, I lost my train. Somebody came in the store and I was half listening to them. Let's stop a bit. In this state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotion, your physical body as well as the whole external world become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought as yourself. That presence is essentially you. That presence is essentially you, and at the same time unconceivably greater than you. What I'm trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. Wow. Hey, you guys. Instead of watching the thinker, you could also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Be here now. The power of now. Into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is a deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from mind activity and create a gap of no mind in which you're highly alert and aware, but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. The essence of meditation. I knew he was going to get to meditation. Page 20. Didn't take long. All right. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end. Hey, Chris Meany. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end and giving it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every movement, even your breathing. Be totally present. Or when you wash your hands, pay attention to all the sense perceptions associated with the activity. The sound and the feel of the water, the movement of your hands. Pay attention to all the sense perceptions associated with the activity. The sound and the feel of the water, the movement of your hands, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into your car, after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Become aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain citation by which you can measure your success in this practice, the degree of peace you feel inside. So I'm reading The Power of Now, Chris, and it's a little longer than I imagined, but just got started yesterday, and so hopefully the last book I read was called Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins, and it was great that I read online like this, and I think this is going to have some value. I really do. It's certainly it's having value for me. I read this years ago, and it feels like it's like I've never even opened the book before. It feels so different. So if you get a copy and read along, that would be great. A lot of power in this book, The Power of Now. So, the single most vital step in your journey towards enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from the mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all that seriously, as your sense of self does not depend on it. Isn't that great? Next subtitle here is Enlightenment, Rising Above Thought. Isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? That's a question. So he has kind of a question and answer format. And so this is the question from one of his students. Isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? Your mind, he says, is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for a specific task. And when the task is completed, you lay it down as it is. As it is, I would say, about 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is also harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this to be true. It causes a serious leakage of vital energy. Hey, Ash. Thanks for dropping in, buddy. This kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What's characterized in an addiction? Quite simply this: you no longer feel that you have a choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure that invariably turns into pain. Guess he's talking to us, you guys. So, Ash, I'm reading from The Power of Now, from Eckhart Tolle. It's an older book. I think he first wrote it in the 90s. I remember seeing him here in Calgary in the 90s. It's just this little guy came to the Center for Positive Living, and I spent a Sunday with him. It was really quite something. And the book had just been published, and he was on a book tour, but very small, like church basements and stuff like that. So it was the early days. But he'd written this because he had an awakening experience. It was pretty cool. The next question is, why should we be addicted to thinking? Because you're identified with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind. Because you believe that you would cease to be if you stop thinking. As you grow up, you form a mental image of who you are based on your personal and cultural conditioning. We may call this phantom self the ego. It consists of mind activity and can only be kept going through constant thinking. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means a false self created by unconscious identification with the mind. Neat. To the ego, the present moment hardly exists. Only past and future are considered important. This total reversal of the truth accounts for the fact that in the ego mode, the mind is so dysfunctional. It is always concerned with keeping the past alive, because without it, who are you? It constantly projects itself into the future to ensure its continued survival. and to seek some kind of release or fulfillment there, it says. It says, one day when this or that or the other happens, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be at peace. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it is not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past. Or it reduces the present to a means to an end. An end that always lies in the mind-projected future. Observe your mind and you will see that this is how it works. The present moment holds the key to liberation. The present moment holds the key to liberation. But you cannot find the present moment as long as you are your mind. Imagine. Next question. I don't want to lose my ability to analyze and discriminate. I wouldn't mind learning to think more clearly in a more focused way, but I don't want to lose my mind. The gift of thought is the most precious thing we have. Without it, we would just be another species of animal. That's a question from one of his students. The predominance of mind is no more than a stage in the evolution of consciousness. We need to go on to the next stage now as a matter of urgency. Otherwise we will be destroyed by the mind, which has grown into a monster. I will talk about this in more detail later. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. Enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought. Not falling back to a level below thought, the level of the animal or the plant. In the enlightened state, we still use our thinking mind when needed, but in a much more focused and effective way than before. We use it mostly for practical purposes, but you are free of the involuntary internal dialogue, and there is inner stillness. When we do use our mind, when a creative solution is needed, you oscillate every few moments or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind. No mind is consciousness without thought. No mind is consciousness without thought. Only in that way is it possible to think creatively, because only in that way does thought have any real power. Thought alone, when it is no longer connected with the much vaster realm of consciousness, quickly becomes barren and insane and destructive. Boy, can we relate to that. Wow. The mind is essentially a survival machine. Attack and defense against other minds, gathering, storing, analyzing information. This is what it is good at. But it is not at all creative. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. Even the great scientists have reported that their creative breakthroughs came at a time of mental quietude. The surprising result of a nationwide inquiry among Americans' most eminent mathematicians, including Einstein, to find out their working methods was that thinking plays only a subordinate part in the brief, decisive phase of the creative act itself. So, I would say that the simple reason why the majority of scientists are not creative is not because they don't know how to think, but because they don't know how to stop thinking. Wow. Hey, Caesar. Thanks for dropping in, bud. Awesome. I'm just reading Power of Now. It's a bit of a classic it's become, written in the 90s, and It's been a long time since I read it, a long time. And so here we go. I'm on page 24. If you've got a copy, get it out, and we'll kind of go through it together. It wasn't through the mind, through thinking, that the miracle that is life on earth or our body was created and is being sustained. There is clearly an intelligence at work that is far greater than the mind. Power greater than ourselves. Imagine. How can a single human cell measuring 1/1000th of an inch in diameter contain instructions within its DNA that could fill 10,000 or 1,000 books of 600 pages each? The more we learn about the workings of the body, the more we realize just how vast is the intelligence at work within it and how little we know. The more we learn about the workings of the body, the more we realize just how vast is the intelligence at work within it and how little we know. When the mind reconnects with that, it becomes a most wonderful tool. It then serves something greater than itself. Oh, look at that. But he's talking about something greater than itself. That's great. Next little subtitle here, emotion, the body's reaction to the mind. Question, what about emotions? I get caught in my emotions more than I do in my mind. Imagine. Mind, in the way I use the word, is not just thought. It includes your emotions, as well as all unconscious, mental, emotional, reactive patterns. Emotion arises at the place where mind and body meet. It is the body's reaction to your mind, or you might say a reflection of your mind in the body. For example, an attack thought or a hostile thought will create a buildup of energy in the body that we call anger. I had some anger last night. It was interesting. It just kind of came out of nowhere. It's like, holy shit. And then after anger came fear. It was so my emotional body's still working. For example, an attack thought or a hostile thought will create a buildup of energy in the body that we call anger. The body is getting ready to fight. The thought that you are being threatened physically or psychologically causes the body to contract. And this is the physical side of what we call fear. Oh my gosh. Research has shown that strong emotions even cause changes in the biochemistry of the body. The biochemical changes represent the physical or mental aspects of our emotion. Of course, you are not usually conscious of all your thought patterns, and it is often only through watching your emotions that you can bring them into awareness. Cool. Watching our emotions, baby. Being conscious. The more you're identified with your thinking, your likes and dislikes and judgments and interpretations, which is to say the less present you are as the watching consciousness, the stronger the emotional energy charge will be, whether you are aware of it or not. If you cannot feel your emotions, if you're cut off from them, you will eventually experience them as experience them on a purely physical level, as a physical problem or symptom. Physical problem or symptom. A great deal has been written about this in recent years, so we don't need to go into it here. A strong, unconscious emotional pattern may even manifest as an external event which appears to just happen to you. Imagine. It seems that our fears can set in motion trains of circumstance, which later places in a position to be hurt. That's from another book. But it's pretty cool. He's just saying exactly the same thing. The strong unconscious emotional pattern may even manifest as an external event that appears to just happen to you. For example, I have observed that people who carry a lot of anger inside without being aware of it and without expressing it are more likely to be attacked, verbally or even physically, by other angry people, and often with no apparent reason. They have a strong emanation of anger that certain people pick up subliminally, and that triggers their own latent anger. Imagine. If you have difficulty feeling your emotions, start by focusing attention on the inner energy field of your body. Feel the body from within. This will also put you in touch with your emotions. We'll explore this in more detail later. Pretty cool. Hey, Aaron, thanks for dropping in, buddy. Cool. I'm reading from Power of Now, and I'm on page 26. Just getting started. Crazy, eh? Anyway, it's really, really good. So, what's happening here in the book is his students basically are asking questions, and he's answering them. And so that's, I'm just reading exactly that, his questions, and then maybe a little bit of my own running commentary as we go. So here it is. You say that an emotion is the mind's reflection in the body, but sometimes there is a conflict between the two. The mind says no, while the emotion says yes, or the other way around. So that's a question from one of his students. His answer: if you really want to know your mind, the body will always give you a truthful reflection. So look at the emotion, or rather feel it in your body. If there is an apparent conflict between them, the thought will be the lie. The emotion will be the truth. Not the ultimate truth. Not the ultimate truth of who you are, but the relative truth of your state of mind at the time. Okay, great. Conflict between surface thoughts and unconscious mental processes is certainly common. You may not be able to bring your unconscious mind activity into awareness as thoughts. Let me read that again. You may not be able to bring your unconscious mind activity into awareness as thoughts, but it will always be reflected in the body as an emotion. Oh, I see. Okay, so we're having emotion, and we know that it's, hey buddy, that the what that's about. Awesome. If we're having emotion, we may not know what is causing the emotion, but if we can feel the emotion, we can connect as thoughts. But it will always be reflected in our body as an emotion, and of this you can become aware. To watch an emotion in this way is basically the same as listening to or watching a thought, which I described earlier. The only difference is that while a thought is in your head, an emotion has a strong physical component, and so is primarily felt in the body. You can then allow the emotion to be there without being controlled by you. You no longer are the emotion, you are the watcher, the observing presence. Oh, great, Sue, thank you. Sue Jones says she's reading the book right now. I'm on page 27. You no longer are the emotion, you are the watcher, the observing presence. If you practice this, all that is unconscious in you will be brought into the light of consciousness. Wow. Question: so observing our emotions is as important as observing our thoughts? Yes, he says. Make it a habit to ask yourself, what's going on inside of me at this moment? That question will point you in the right direction. But don't analyze, just watch. Focus your attention within. Feel the energy of the emotion. If there is no emotion present, take your attention more deeply into the inner energy field of your body. It is the doorway to being. Wow. Well, I think that's it for today. I only read 10 pages, but I think that is it for today. I'm going to try to do this a little bit every day, but I have a store full of customers. It's Saturday afternoon. So anyway, you guys, maybe check out our website and make a comment. I love when you make comments on these, and we're going to power through. We're going to power through the power of now, right? We're on it. Okay, so love you guys so much, and thanks. I want to remind you that we have a meditation group here on Monday evenings, 6:30 for meditation if you want to pop in and sit with us. And I've got an event coming up on the 4th of June. This amazing young man, James, is coming to sing kirtan. So I'd love if you drop by. Okay, cheers. Love you guys. Bye.